Welcome back, you beautiful bunch. How are you? I hope you've been having a good week so far. Hmm? It's getting really cold here now. We've we're in the midst of winter and I'm starting to feel it. Just a little bit. It's just a little nip. Okay, so what I was thinking about looking at today was a section of human geography. So I thought we could look at population structure. So this is population indicators. These are things that we look at when we look at a country and we try to understand its population and how its population is made up. Population structure, and I also want to go through population pyramids, just how we read them and what they tell us about the population structure. Great, there we go. Now, when we look at population structure, we're going to look at the very basic types of indicators, and then we can see if we can find some on our world and data, see if we can look at individual countries and case studies. For now, we're going to look specifically at indicators that change the total population count. So birth rate, death rate, we'll maybe get to like infant mortality, those types of things, life expectancy. So anything that will change the overall size of a population. So things that show us about how a population is changing. So we're going to look at fertility indicators, mortality indicators, and then what natural population increase means. So indicators of fertility tells us how many kids are being born in a country in the population. Indicators of mortality show us how many people die in the country. Okay, then natural population increase is basically the difference between the two. So if we have more people being born than people dying, generally we will see an increase in the population. Other way around, if we have less people being born than there are people dying, we have a decrease in the overall population. And there's a very specific number, there's a very specific um, fertility rate or birth rate that we need to maintain overall population. So let's just start with fertility indicators. Fertility indicators, so we're going to look at crude birth rate. When it comes to any of these indicators that is a rate, like mortality or death rate, birth rate, it's always per 1,000. The reason for this is because you have countries of different sizes. If you have a country that has 1 million people in it, they're more likely to have a lot more babies than a country with 1,000 people in it. So we need to put it on the same scale. So we say, okay, per 1,000 people in the country, how many are having kids? How many are born? So it's always on a per 1,000. So crude birth rate is how many babies are born in a year for every 1,000 people. Now, this is generally of the whole population. When we look at fertility rate, all right, so there's the indicator. There's the formula. Total number of births divided by population times 1,000. It's very rarely that I see students actually needing to know or use this formula. It more just helps for them to understand it. Then when we get to fertility rate, so remember the previous one was number of babies born in a population. But fertility rate looks per woman. Now it's a bit more specific. So this is the average number of kids that each woman would have in her childbearing years. Okay, this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting when we look at the replacement rate. So the replacement rate is the average fertility rate that we need for a population to maintain itself. So it doesn't increase or decrease, it just stays the same. Now, that replacement rate is 2.1. That means that every woman in her lifetime would need to have 2.1 kids. I'm sure you have questions about the point one. Okay, the point one is to make up for those who don't have kids with lifetime. So maybe they die before they reach childbearing age, or they're not able to have kids, or they don't have kids. That point one makes up for the little um, uncertainty. Okay, I think let's take a pause over there and we go to our world and data and we see what information we can find on these two indicators. So we've looked at crude birth rate and total fertility rate. So let's see what we can find in our world and data. Okay, population growth. Hey, good morning, Sergeant. Nice to see you back. I suppose it's afternoon for you still. Okay, here we go. We've got fertility rate. So let's just open that graph so long. And then I want to find birth rate. There we go. Just open it as a chart first. Great. Okay, so remember birth rate is per 1,000 people. You just, I don't think I can open this anymore. Maybe? There we go. So birth rate is per 1,000 people. I think this is the world. Yes. So this is worldwide. And it goes up to 2021. So I want to just check that. Yeah, this ends at the same point. Does it start at the same point? Yes. So whenever I compare graphs, I first make sure that it starts and ends at the same year so that we don't get a distorted view. So let's say I moved the graph to start there. It looks like this has much less of a decrease compared to this that suddenly has a dramatic decrease. So I always make sure that my graph starts and ends at the same year, so I'm looking at the same time frame. Okay, but in both cases, there has been a decrease. So the average fertility rate was 4.8-ish births per woman, and it has dropped to 2.3. That is very close to the replacement rate. It does still mean that our population is increasing, but it's quite close to the replacement rate. A lot of studies suggest that means that the population is stabilizing. So we're reaching a plateau. But we'll get to that in a different section where we look at the demographic transition model. Okay, and like I was saying, this is per 1,000 people, whilst this is per woman. So it looks at a different section of the population per 1,000 people because different countries have different size populations. So you have to bring it back to the same level. And this is per woman over the whole lifetime, her whole life. And I want to compare with South Africa because that's always our case study. Okay, I see South Africa's also had a decrease in both of the indicators. So birth rate started at around 41 kids per 1,000, 41 babies per 1,000. And it has gone to 19.8. I find it interesting that there was a little dip over here. I wonder what that is. I know that this isn't the video where we're doing factors that affect indicators. That's a whole different conversation. We can get back to that one some other time. But whenever I look at these graphs, I always wonder what happened during these years for that dip to occur. Okay, so fertility rate has gone from 6 kids per woman to 2.37. Is that the same as the world fertility rate? Yeah, that's very close. So it was above global average for quite some time. And then around 1997, it kind of met the global rate. So that's interesting. I always thought that South Africa was a little bit behind, was a little bit less developed than the global average. Let's put this one on. Yeah, this is what I expected to see. So you can see South Africa is slightly higher than the world average. Okay, there it had some interesting dip, and here it goes back to higher. But per woman, it seems to be fairly average. So that is the fertility. Um, like I was saying, replacement rate is 2.1 as a fertility rate, which means that the average woman has to have 2.1 kids overall to maintain the population. And you could see that the global average was 2.3-ish. So we're still above that replacement rate, which means that our overall population is still growing. So let's actually just bring up the overall. Oh, yes, there we go. Yay. Sometimes these graphs are difficult to find. I'm glad that they're being fairly easy today. So you can see that it's still steadily increasing despite the fact that overall birth rate is decreasing. All of that means is that the rate that it is increasing is starting to slow down. And now we're looking at the not so good things, which is the mortality indicators. Okay, mortality indicators is the number of people that die in a given population. So first we look at crude death rate. So crude death rate, similar to birth rate, is per 1,000 people in a year. So it's the number of deaths per 1,000 within a specific year. Infant mortality rate is per 1,000 births. I think I mentioned infant mortality rate in one of my older videos, but it's just to recap it again, it's the number of infants that survive. Oh, sorry, that it's the number of infants that die before they are 1 year old per 1,000 infants born within that year. Okay, and then life expectancy is how long someone or a population is expected to live. So how old they're expected to get, obviously in a given country at that time. Let's see if we can find these things on our Walden data. Okay, there's life expectancy. So let's just go to that already. So first thing I want to do is I want to change these years. You can see over there it's 1770, or I think you can see it, but it starts at 1770 and I want to move that to 1950. So that is looking at the same years as the fertility indicators are. So we've selected a lot of countries over here. The world is also in it. Great. We need South Africa. Africa. Overall, you can see a general increase of life expectancy, which is a good thing. It means that we're living longer. Yay. It also means that healthcare is probably increasing. Nice to meet you. I think this is your first time here. Hey. So overall life expectancy is increasing. That means that people are living longer. They're expected to live longer. And it's usually a sign that healthcare is getting better, living conditions are getting better, everything like that. So general development. Then we need to find crude death rate. Oh wait, there we go. There it is. There we go. First thing I'm checking is the years. So it starts 1950 and ends in 2021. Good. So it's the same as all of our other graphs. Overall, it is decreasing, which means that in a given year, there are less people dying. Overall, good to see a decrease, which means that less people are dying in a given year. Just bear in mind that these aren't absolute numbers. So if a country is getting bigger, if there are more people in the country, they might be experiencing a higher number of deaths, but it's proportionately smaller. So even though, how do I put it? They have more people living there, so there are more people that could die, but compared to the whole population, it's a smaller fraction that are dying. So even if we looked at um, number of deaths per country, that might be increasing if their population is increasing, but their death rate would be decreasing. Hope that makes sense. Okay, then what was the other one we were going to look at? Infant mortality rate. Yes. And again, across the board, infant mortality seems to be decreasing. That is good. It means that when the kids are born, they stay alive. Um, oh wait, but this is a percentage. Is it? Yes. Oh, okay. That's a bummer because then we can't compare it like we've been comparing the death rates and the other statistics. So this one they're sharing as a percentage. The other one was number per 1,000. And I'm glad to see that South Africa is decreasing. Again, that is good. In the same way, South Africa seems to be more or less on track with the global average. That's good to see. We're not that far behind. So we have an idea of what the mortality indicators are. If mortality increases, it means that something has happened maybe to healthcare or standard of living or some or other type of disastrous event like a war. I think I did see a few spikes where there would have been a big war happening or like the world wars. We see a few spikes around there. Overall, it's more an indicator of lifestyle. So we see that crude death rate and life expectancy shows us something about people's standards of living and their access to healthcare. Also, it shows a lot about education and understanding of health. That brings us to natural population increase. So we have kids coming into the world and people exiting the world. So if we have more people being born than are dying, we have an increase. If we have more people dying than being born, we'll have a decrease. So that is specifically natural population increase. It only looks at birth rate and death rate. It does not look at any type of immigration or immigration. So no people moving in or moving out of the country. It is only looking at birth and death. And then, okay, doubling time, the number of years that it takes for a population to double in size. So let's go take a look at these graphs of population. Okay, we can see that there is an overall increase. That makes sense. But there are some countries where we're seeing, I think I saw one, a decrease. There, Serbia. So take a closer look over here. So I'm going to remove these. Hi, South Africa. There. Yeah, Serbia has been decreasing. That's interesting. I want to see what the birth rate looks like. Oh wow, that's actually been quite low for a while. Remember, the replacement rate is 2.1. So you need fertility rate of 2.1 for a population just to maintain itself. And we can see that it's been in the 2 point something region for a while. And it's gone below the replacement rate, yeah, since 1957. It's been below the replacement rate. So they haven't been having enough kids to sustain the current population. And it's been increasing a bit. Since 2005, it's slowly increasing again. That's interesting. And the birth rate seems to have stabilized as well. But because the fertility rate is still below the replacement rate, it's not enough to maintain that population. So Serbia's population will be decreasing. I want to see if we can compare it to their death rate. Hmm, one of the few that's actually increased. I suppose that would pile onto the low fertility rate. So not many people are having kids and a lot of people are dying, then yes, it makes sense that the overall population would increase. And that brings me to the age structure. So age structure is, we're finally getting to the section of population structure when we look at how the population is broken apart for us to understand it a bit better. So when we are trying to understand how a population changes, we take a look at the population structure and we start with the age structure. So we break it up into three groups. We have the youthful age group, we have the adult, and we have the aging. And these groups are pretty much defined by their ability to have a job. It's it's a terrible way of classifying these groups, but yes. So the youthful age group is around anything from infant to 16. You'll see on the population graphs, the population pyramids, when we get to that, you'll see it has the same categories. So anything from 0 to 16 is youthful. So that's the kids. They should still be in school. They shouldn't be getting jobs. Not yet. Okay, the adult age group is then anything from 16 to, I think the benchmark is 65. Double check. And then aging is anything from 65 onwards, so they should be retired. The adult population, the adult age group, is the group that is expected to be working and earning an income. So they are the economically independent. So, like I was saying, these the proportion of these three groups can explain some things about the the different indicators. So if you have a large adult age group, you can also expect to see a large or larger birth rate or fertility rate. If you have a large aging age group, you'll probably have a lower birth rate. So youthful age group is anything younger than 15 years old, and they are considered economically dependent because they're not supposed to be working yet. They are still relying on their parents or their guardians or their families to look after them. So they are dependent on whoever's taking. Hello. Sorry, my puppy has just decided to join. Say hello to them. Hello. This is Loki. We adopted him like weeks ago, and he's still teething, so he's chewing everything. But look, he said hello. Stop chewing my hand. Ay, ow. You hear your toy. Do you want to go play? Go play. Mm. Shame, he's very cute. Ow, he bites hard. Oh, shame. Okay. Um, So he would be economically dependent. He's not able to earn any money. He depends on us. And also, he's so cute. In LEDCs, we tend to see a higher proportion of the youthful age group. So we have a lot more kids in LEDCs, but in MEDCs, they're quite a bit lower. So in MEDCs, it's a lot more expensive to have kids. There's a lot more information before having kids. There's more decision making and starting a family. So there tends to be a smaller youthful population. Okay, then we have the adult age group. Okay, so the adult age group is anyone who would now technically be able to work. So from 16 to 64. These are your very economically productive, and they are supposed to support both the youthful and the aging population. So any money that is made by them is used on the other two sectors or the age groups. That can be both on a personal level, so parents looking after their kids or their own parents and retirement, or it could be more of a countrywide thing, so income tax is used for schools or pension policies, for example. So the money made by the economically active group, so the adult age group, is used to support the economically dependent. In MEDCs, this is typically the largest age group. In LEDCs, the largest age group is usually the youthful age. Then we get to the aging group. So aging group is anyone older than 65. At this point, they are usually retired and they don't have their own income. So they are dependent on the economically active group or the government, their country. Because they have specific requirements, it's worth knowing how the country is split up. So if you have a country that has a large aging age group, it's not really worth investing a lot of money into building new schools. No, then you rather invest your money in frail care. That's where your population is. Okay, in LEDCs, we are starting to see more older people as the life expectancy increases, as the death rate decreases. Now we're seeing this aging group start to grow. In MEDCs, it's already quite a large portion of the overall population. Dependency ratio is looking at how many people are economically inactive, as in, economically dependent, as in they are too young or too old to be working, they shouldn't be working, and compare it to the number of people that are in the adult age group and are earning money. So if you have a lot of youthful people or a lot of aging people, depending on a small adult population, it can put a lot of strain on that adult population. So that is the dependency ratio. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth with sex structure because sex structure looks at the ratio of males to females or men to women. We look at this when we want to understand things like work patterns or birth rates or even life expectancy. So, for example, I believe women have a longer life expectancy than men. But if we're looking at things like I have over here migration for work. So in LEDCs where you have people looking for work in other, it can be in other countries or other cities. So maybe you have people in rural areas looking for work in the city, then it's usually the men that move. That means that you have a little bit of an imbalance. Then you have the women left at home in the rural areas. So you have the women who then need to look after the elderly or the kids. And those are also the ones that need to tend to farms or agriculture. Usually those women don't have the same level of education. So even though they are being so heavily depended on, they don't have the skills for it. Those that are skilled, usually the men, are the ones who leave to find work elsewhere. So that's what we look at when we look at the sex structure. We look at the different movements of the population. We look at the different life expectancies or birth ratios. But for the time being, I want to look at population pyramids. I have found this website over here, quite useful. So this is a population pyramid. Population pyramid breaks up the population using those two sets of groups. So that being age and sex. So age structure, you can see each one of these little bars down here. That is an age group. So it's from 0 to 4. I don't think you guys can see it. Can I? There we go. That works. So 0 to 4, that's this bottom bar over here. And 5 to 9, that's that one. 10 to 11, that's that one. Mm, Usually they have this ending at 15. Usually when I see these population pyramids, it's 0 to 5 and then 6 to 10. Basically, it ends at 15 so that the 16 and up is the adult age group. But that's fine. And then over here, we have the male versus female. So on the right-hand side, we have the female, right? I'm assuming because it's pink. Yes, female, and then on the left, it's the male. And they are presenting it as a percentage. So that percentage means it's the percentage of the population. Other population pyramids might actually use it as the number of people. So how many thousands or how many millions. In this case, it's percentage, so we can see the proportion a bit better. So this is the world's population pyramid. It's from last year, but it's fine, we'll make do. And you can see that it has this narrow top. It's not really great at showing you why it's called a pyramid, but it used to, let's see if we can find an older version back a few years. There we go. That's when it was still a pyramid in 1978. So you have this broad base over here that is your youthful population. Over there you can see it's a relatively high percentage. And as it gets older, or as the people get older, you can see the proportion starts to decrease. And then, where is that? Five-ish. Here we go. So this is the aging group. And you can see there's a lot fewer of there. So we have a typical triangle pyramid shape. So as I move from the 1970s back to our current year, you'll see that the base is starting to shrink and the middle is starting to bulge. That? Okay, what that means is that there are less kids being born. So there are less infants or newborns over here. That makes this a smaller percentage. But it also means that less people are dying as they grow older. And there are more people in the adult age group. There we go. And for the first time, it actually looks like this 0 to 4 age group is smaller than the next one. You see. In the beginning, it was a triangle, it was a pyramid. It had a broad base and it got narrower to the top. But now it's starting to get narrower at the bottom. That means there are less youthful, there's a smaller youthful age group. There are less kids being born. It also means that less people are dying. Now, it does project a little bit into the future based on the current trends. So let's take a look at that. There we go. I've gone quite a bit forward. You can see that this is starting to, it seems like stabilize. So it's more or less the same percentage for each of these age groups. And you also notice that the aging age group is starting to increase. With the lower death rate, we have a higher life expectancy, so we have more in the aging. Now let's see if we can find a specific country. I'm of course going to start with South Africa. Okay, so we have a fairly broad base over there. That makes sense because it is still an LEDC, so it's not very developed. Generally, LEDCs have a broader base, which means a higher birth rate, a narrow top, which means a higher death rate. When the birth rate starts to decrease and the death rate starts to decrease, you'll see that this gets narrower and this gets wider. Go back a little bit. Go. So there you can see that classic pyramid shape. They had a high fertility rate over here, high birth rate, and wow, let's just notice the difference with the male and female side. So there are a lot more. Obviously, in the youthful age group, it's fairly proportional. It's quite even until about from the age of 25 and upwards, you see a lot less men than women. This probably is why they say women have a higher life expectancy than men. It makes sense if you look at it like this and see that more women are reaching an older age. I just didn't expect it to be such a dramatic difference. I thought that we would just see it over here right at the top in the aging group. I actually want to show you Japan's one so you can see what it looks like when the population decreases. So you can see that the base is much narrower than the middle. That means that they're not having a lot of kids. There is a very low fertility rate, very low birth rate, and clearly a very low death rate as well, because a lot of them are living to an old age. We have a percentage over here that's 100 plus, and the biggest proportion is in the adult age group, and some even going into the aging age group. So that will eventually put pressure on the younger kids. So when this this little proportion over here, when they reach the adult age group and they start becoming economically active, earning money, they need to support all of this. So they need to support this massive section, this massive proportion that came before them. The sad thing is that that's going to lead to a snowball effect. That means that this generation over here isn't likely to have a lot of kids if they need to support the older generation, which means that in turn, there isn't a younger generation to support them either. And like I say, that doesn't mean directly as in they are supporting grandparents or their own parents. It can also just be the actual income tax available for the aging population. They were in the news at the start of last year where they were declaring they had something of a fertility crisis, that people aren't having enough. And this is why, or this is the problem that they're trying to address. There isn't enough people, or there won't be enough people in the economically active group to support the aging population. Well, I hope that this has been interesting. So I hope that you learned something new, or maybe had a few questions answered. Thank you very much for joining. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again next week. Yeah. Thank you for joining. Cheers. Bye.